Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
Felons, friends, and freedom lovers, welcome back to Felony Friday. Felony Friday, of course, is a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Now, the Lions of Liberty podcast, now in 2017, we have 3 distinct shows per week every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Every Monday, we have our original show hosted by Mark Claire, and that show is going to mostly be interviews with leading voices in the Liberty movement, the occasional roundtable, and things like that. Of course, we might have some libertarians in living rooms drinking liquor episodes in that slot as well. The new show on the Lions of Liberty podcast is hosted by Brian McWilliams, and it's called Electric Liberty Land. It's going to be a really fun show. It's going to be sort of a variety show, but it's going to focus mostly on current events and giving Liberty perspective on those current events, and it's going to be a lot of fun to listen to. And of course, today, you're listening to the first episode in 2017 of Felony Friday, where we focus here on Felony Friday on exposing injustice in the broken criminal justice system. This is episode number 53 of Felony Friday, so that means you'll be able to find these show notes with links and notes with everything that we're going to talk about today, and it's going to be a lot of different felonies trending in the news, lots of different news items. So you're going to be sure to want to check out those news items and follow along. If you're listening at home, if you're in your car, please do not try to read these news stories on your phone, but you can find that all at lionsofliberty.com/FF53. So check that out. And I'm excited for today's show. Just one more note before we get started. This show is sponsored by IgniteLiberty.us. At Ignite Liberty, we sell Make Liberty Great Again hats and shirts, 2 different eye-catching designs. The shirts are available in many, many different colors, and the hats are all marked down to $19.95, and you can get a 10% discount on all your stuff at IgniteLiberty.us using discount code LIBERTY. Please check out IgniteLiberty.us, and I hope you enjoy today's show. Okay, let's get to the meat of the show. Today's episode is going to be in a familiar format, I think, for long-time Lions of Liberty and long-time Felony Friday listeners. Maybe some of you new listeners haven't heard this format yet. I know it's been a little while since we've gone through and really looked at some felonies trending in the news. We're going to do that today, and I'm going to be bringing on my fellow Lions of Liberty co-founder here and host of our Monday show, Mark Claire, to talk about this. So, Mark, welcome to Felony Friday. Welcome back to Felony Friday.
Welcome back. Yeah, I think this is like my 3rd or 4th appearance.
3rd or 4th? I've lost count. I think you've been on the most. I think you've been on. You and John Ziegler.
Yeah, no, I was on the first Felony Friday ever, and now I'm on the first one the new year. So I get the sense that you see me as sort of like symbolizing like a phoenix rising, like a new beginning. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Sort of. That's kind of what I get when I look at your Skype picture. Our audience can't see it. I wish they could, but it's this
beautiful flowing locks.
It's this giant picture of Mark's face, just his face with his flowing long blonde hair. So maybe I'll put it in the show notes for you. I don't know.
That's why the show notes are so essential, people. We don't do these for our health. Find
Absolutely.
all the key elements to understanding our kind of brando liberty here.
You can look behind the curtain and see more than you ever want to see. But I did talk about in the intro today, Mark, a little bit about our new format, about Brian's new show, about how we're continuing Felony Friday on Fridays. So what's going on with your show on Monday? Is anything changing here? Or?
Well, I don't know if anything's changing per se. I'm just going to try to be a little maybe more focused with the interviews that I choose, and I might try to do a little bit more with them. And, we're just getting into the new year, just getting out of the holidays, so I haven't really solidified too much. But I think one thing I really want to focus on is kind of putting out other people and the work they're doing for the ideas of liberty. Obviously, I have a lot of different kind of people I interview. Some interviews are more philosophical. Some are kind of just more about what other people are doing. But that's kind of how I'm starting the year off anyway, by highlighting the work of other people. And we're going to do that this coming Monday. A guy I know familiar to a lot of our listeners, Alex Merced, recently ran for Senate in New York and has been very active on social media in the Libertarian Party. And he is doing so much for liberty. He just finished the Senate campaign, and instead of taking time off, he was rolled right into starting a whole bunch of podcasts. And he's just a guy that's really out there doing a lot for liberty. So I wanted to take some time to chat with Alex about everything he's doing. So that's what we'll be doing on Monday. And then, of course, we'll still be doing all sorts of roundtables and fun type of shows like we did the Liberty Draft recently. That was a big hit. I'll be coming up with other kind of fun ideas like that, and we'll see where it goes. The sky is really the limit for us here. This is only the beginning.
Yeah, lots of new stuff going on at Lions of Liberty, and I am really looking forward to that interview with Alex Merced on Monday. He's a great guy to follow on social media, as you were saying. He has like 5 different podcasts he's starting, but I'm sure we'll talk about all that stuff on Monday. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Let's jump into this Felony Friday, these topics trending in the news today. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's one story that as I was searching for stuff to talk about, it was everywhere. It was everywhere I looked. All of the criminal justice sites were talking about it. And it's this story out of Missouri where, and every title was almost the same in the way they looked at it, saying that Missouri students may face felony charges for fights or bullying. And this stems from a new law that I believe actually was passed in 2014, but it took effect on January 1st. And it could mean harsher punishments for kids who get caught fighting or bullying in school. Now, it's not really clear. It's not really called out in the actual law. It doesn't say at schools if you're fighting or bullying, then you could be charged with a felony. But what it does, it reclassifies 3rd and 4th degree assaults and changes them from misdemeanors to felonies. And that's the type of stuff that harassment and fighting in school would be classified under. So it's definitely a worrisome thing. And one note that I think is really where this link between the school and this law comes from is when they're talking about harassment being a felony rather than a misdemeanor, in order to understand how they categorize that, if the victim suffers emotional distress from an act committed for that purpose, for the purpose of emotional distress, then the state will consider harassment to be a form of school bullying. And harassment is among one of the offenses in Missouri that school districts they're required to report that to local law enforcement. So you can definitely see this being as a way that possibly leading more kids into being charged with felonies and ultimately leading them into the into the prison system where they could ultimately get stuck, as we've seen in so many cases we've talked about on this show with recidivism. But Mark, what did you think about this law? Do you think that pretty much everyone who is reporting on this, do you think they're getting it right, saying this is something that could really affect the school system in the state of Missouri?
Well, I'm not concerned about how it affects the school system in the state of Missouri as much as it affects these kids who, many of which might be involved in very normal teenage activity that can suddenly become felons. And we've discussed to no end how that felon label can affect your life negatively, really for the rest of your life. It can affect the ability to get employment. It can affect your ability to, if you're in a custody battle, it can affect that. If you ever have a custody issue with another child, there are so many things that felony label. You can't buy a gun. You can't vote. I mean, it's a scarlet letter that leads you on forever. So is some of this activity, like nobody's for bullying per se, but at the same time, there has to be a certain extent of understanding that kids will be kids and kids make fun of each other, and maybe we punish them for that, but sentencing them to a life of essentially having that felon label and essentially being a second-class citizen, I don't see how that's good for anybody. Maybe there are people who think that this will help the atmospheres in school, but I mean, we're actually in a stage here where wearing a Make Liberty Great Again hat, not Make Liberty Great Again, but a Make America Great Again hat, maybe a Make Liberty Great Again hat too.
It might.
People consider that racism and harassment. If you support Donald Trump, there are places where people will think you are harassing them for that support. So now we're at a point where you could see all this coming together where even political speech at a school might be translated into harassment, which gets turned into a felony that someone has to carry for the rest of their life. So I see a very dangerous slope this is leading to.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at talking about this, where if the intent is to cause emotional distress, I mean, that is the intent of bullies. That's the intent of most high school students. They're trying to get under their friends' skins, or they're trying to get under people that they don't get along with, trying to get under their skin. But just because you make fun of someone, even if you hurt their feelings, there's no reason, there's no way that charging them with a felony and shoving them in to the prison system is somehow going to solve the problem, is going to make it better. I think that the thought process here is by making a harsher punishment, it's going to deter children, young adults from acting in this way. But the fact of the matter is it's not, because most young adults are not rational. They haven't yet learned consequences. They don't know that, making fun of someone or wearing a Make America Great Again hat to get under someone's skin could be perceived as harassment, which could then lead to them getting charged with a felony, which could then ruin their entire life. They're not thinking that way. And that's not to say that if they were thinking that way, that it would be right in that matter anyway, just to say that, they won't even see it coming. So there's really no good reason for this law to change this law.
I think, if anything, the law should be changed to go back the other way. So this is less harsh of a penalty. I mean, some of the stuff might already be too severe of a penalty. I mean, why do we need to bring everything into the criminal justice system, especially when we're talking about, like I said, kids doing teenage stuff? Now, look, if a group of kids actually corners someone and bullies them and beats them and or something like that, I mean, obviously there are cases where this should be, seen as the criminal element. But when we're just talking about, the vague things like, quote, harassment and bullying, and this blanketly applying, criminal penalties to it, I think that alone is very troublesome. So I don't even like how the law is now, and let alone the fact they want to increase all of this stuff to become felony.
Yeah, increasing it to the point where they could be charged, be Class E felons, where jail time for that would be up to 4 years in prison. That's incredibly insane. But I want to move on and talk about another topic here that it's been in and out of the news. It was huge news earlier last year in 2016. And Mark, you actually had on your show, you had Dr. Mark Edwards on to talk about the Flint water crisis. That was, what episode was that? That was episode number 203, I believe. So you can get that lionsofliberty.com/203. You can hear Mark interview Dr. Mark Edwards on the Flint water crisis. But I want to talk about it because it's back in the news. In the 67th District Court, a judge has authorized charges against former Flint emergency managers Darnell Early, Gerald Ambrose, and city official Howard Croft and Doherty Johnson. And all four defendants in this case are going to face felony charges for false pretenses and conspiracy to commit fraud. And with these charges, they could serve up to 20 years in prison. And the latest charges, there were charges previous to this. I think 9 people were charged previous to these 4 in regards to the Flint water scandal. And the Attorney General of Michigan, Bill Schuette, maybe, I don't know if that's how you say it. If you're from that state, maybe you can correct me. He alleges that the defendants conspired really to really go around the Flint water treatment system, and they were taking water, I guess, directly from the Flint River without it being set up with the water filtration system to actually filter that water to make it safe to drink, when they should have been going around and using a different water supplier. And there were warnings, and I think they actually faked some environmental orders in order to get around it. So, Mark, with this case, and I did listen to your interview with Dr. Mark Edwards, but you probably have a little more knowledge on this Flint case than I do. What's something that jumped out for you from this article?
I think just the fact that people are being charged. I mean, that's a good thing, right? It would still 13 more people than were ever charged for the financial crisis. Now, maybe we don't see financial crimes as serious as actually literally poisoning people's water. And maybe we shouldn't. I don't know. Poisoning people is pretty bad. But I think it's very important that justice becomes served in this case. And especially because this makes no sense to me, but I always see this argument of, you ever see the meme out there? It's like somebody holding the dirty bottle of water in Flint and it says like, anarchist water, or like, this is what libertarians would want, like as if that's the vision we have for the world, is dirty water everywhere.
That doesn't even make any sense.
It really doesn't, because this is a government controlled water supply. Now they can say they farmed it out to private elements, and that's where the problem stems from. But as we've discussed on the Lions of Liberty podcast and in so many other formats, that's really an example of cronyism, of crony capitalism. That's a problem of coercive government. It's not a problem of a free market, which really has no play here at all. I mean, the fact that there are private companies profiting off this at some point down the supply chain, again, like I said, that's an instance of corruption and crony capitalism that has nothing to do with free market, whatever. So, but, people are always going to take that, especially progressives with their memes. They're always going to take ridiculous things and just, use them to slam free markets or push their worldview or whatever. But obviously there are crimes that have been committed here, no matter what your point of view. So I think it's, now I don't know if these specific people are necessarily the ones that are at fault. It's possible that because this issue is so politicized that they're just looking for a few scapegoats, and maybe these people are convenient scapegoats. I don't know enough of the details, about the role of these specific individuals. So, I think there is some possibility that you might need to look out for, like, are the right people being looked at here, or where should we be looking at much bigger levels of responsibility, whether it's the governor, whether it's, the EPA and other organizations that got involved along the way that also allowed this to happen. So I guess maybe that's my concern, is you might see, quote, justice served against some people, but not actually address any of the bigger issues, the systemic problems, or maybe some other even more guilty individuals along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. From the outside, this looks like, a no-brainer move. They're pressing charges against people that were responsible, that should be held accountable. But like you said, are these the actual people that caused the problem? Were they the people making the call, or were they just yes men who are now taking the fall? I think there's a really interesting thing that Flint Mayor Karen Weaver said, and she sees the charges here as a broader indictment of the state's emergency manager system. And really, the way she looks at it is these people are appointed from outside the city, and they take power. And she says they're stripping this power away from the elected mayor and the council. So you have people coming in from outside the city of Flint, from the state and federally from the EPA, dictating policy. And her quote is, "It's taken the voice of the people and taken our democracy." I don't know if I agree with the wording there entirely, but the rhetoric there does make sense. I mean, you have the people who are drinking the water, consuming the water, really have no control over it. It's sort of almost a tragedy of the commons type deal. I don't know if it's something that you've thought of in this case, Mark.
Right. Well, it's also a very sort of dictatorial move. So it's like, you take power away from the most local of government. Now, obviously, libertarians have all different ideas about how government should work, if government should exist at all. But it just seems very rational that if we are to have any level of government that is going to do things such as provide water supply and that kind of thing, it should be the local people, then the local officials that are involved in it. But in the case of Michigan, you get these outside parties that basically come in, strip all the power away from the local people and completely take over and basically act like outside dictators within the small confines of Michigan. But they're basically an outside dictator that comes in and starts basically just central commanding their little city and the water supply. So it's not surprising, really, when you think about it that way, that something like this would happen.
The outside dictators come in and start dictating, because that's what they do.
It's what they do.
Always dictating, those dictators. But yeah, it's the Flint water crisis. It's really just it's a microcosm of the problem with our system. And unfortunately, many left-leaning type people choose to blame libertarians for it, which makes no sense at all, instead of looking at the problems with the bureaucracy of government, which are really causing it. So let's move on. I do want to play. You've played it before, Mark, I think once or twice on this show. Is this a crime, and should anyone do time? And we have 3 different ones to talk about. We'll try to move through them fairly quickly here. The first one, it's a sort of a misleading title. It's titled, "California Democrats Legalize Child Prostitution." And I saw this, it popped up on my Facebook feed.
The headline should be a crime.
Yeah, the headline should be a crime.
And their time
How misleading the headline is.
Ending this newspaper.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a newspaper.
This is from
fake news. It's fake news.
This is from worldnetdaily.com, this reporting of this article. So.
Yeah.
So I guess the slant shouldn't be shocking from that sort of conservative publication.
No, it should not. But this really does speak to how things just get a life of their own. I saw this posted on Facebook by one of my right-wing Facebook friends saying, "Oh, look at California. They're legalizing child prostitution. They're legalizing drugs. It's turning into anarchy, blah, blah, blah." Anyway, that's really not at all what's happening here. Well, they are legalizing drugs, marijuana, which is a good thing. But they're not legalizing child prostitution. Still, if somebody is kidnapping a child and, force them into prostitution, that person, the adult, can still be prosecuted. What they're doing is they're not going to prosecute the children who are being pimped out.
Right.
So I don't know, Mark. I think it's pretty straightforward, but let me just turn it over to you. So Is this a crime? Should a child be prosecuted for being forced into prostitution?
I guess it's not entirely clear if they're always being forced, but either way, they are not the ones committing a criminal act, no matter how you look at it. And I guess unless you look at it like a conservative Republican who thinks consensual acts between adults should be banished and therefore all prostitution should be made illegal. But there's a couple certain situations where this could apply. One, the child is literally being held captive and being forced to, engage in prostitution. In that case, that child is a victim. So the person that should be prosecuted might be maybe the John, if they're knowingly using a child prostitute, or the pimp or whoever is forcing them into service. These are the people committing the crimes, not the child themselves. The other possibility is that it's maybe a 15-year-old who is consensually, participating in prostitution. And in that case, if they're doing it consensually, but the adult knows that they are underage, and now we can argue about where that age of consent should be. I don't think it's necessarily clear that where that should be biologically. Different societies seem to come to different conclusions about them. Even in the US, different states come to different conclusions about what that specific age is. But we do generally agree, I think, with the idea, at least I agree, that there is some point where a child is considered a child and not fully able to make certain decisions or related to, especially related to sex and that type of thing. So, if you have some creepy older man who is knowingly, paying a 13-year-old child, for instance, for prostitution, okay, that man should be arrested. That man is, to me, exploiting a child and abusing a child who's not old enough to make that adult decision. But again, the child is really a victim in that circumstance. So no matter what circumstances lead up to this arrest or what would have been an arrest in the past, I don't see any way that you can say that, the child is the one that should be arrested, especially because the entire premise is that it's child prostitution. And it's worse because it's a child, because a child is not old enough to make these decisions for themselves. So it's silly I think it's a great thing that they passed it. I don't know what we're judging, if it's a crime or not. Is the law a crime? Is the act of the child a crime? But I mean, there's definitely crimes involved when we're talking about children, especially when we're talking about actual children. Now, we can argue maybe 17 people cannot make that decision. I don't know. I mean, I think that's a tougher call.
Well, I guess you could kind of break it down. And I know what your answer is, and I'm going to agree with it, but is prostitution a crime?
Not in and of itself, no.
Right. So prostitution is not a crime. So I guess another aspect of this would be, is kidnapping a child and forcing them into prostitution a crime?
Yes, it is.
Yes. And it seems like the problem is that, people look at this from the right, is they mix it all together and they're not separating the issue. And on the left, like you said, this is a good first step. You don't want to prosecute children who are either caught up in this, who have been kidnapped or being forced into it, or if they're doing it consensually, if they're 16 or 17 or whatever age. You don't want to prosecute them and ruin their life. And the shame is that the liberals don't come out and actually understand the issue overall. They don't just try to legalize prostitution as a whole, which would probably really help to fix this issue and bring it all out into the daylight, so this stuff isn't forced into back alleys and shady hotels, and would probably be a lot safer for everyone involved in prostitution. They choose not to do that. They kind of chip away at different areas of it. So it's one of those issues that they can make any news source or whatever fake news source can pick at this law passed. This law is Senate Bill 1322, and I'll link to it.
This is
on the
fake
show
news, by the way. This WND headline is fake news because nothing about child prostitution becomes legal with this. Basically, we just decriminalize the child themselves. That's basically all this seems to do. And as far as I can tell, anybody that's pimping out a child or using one as a John, that's still illegal. So it's ridiculous to say that this is legalizing child prostitution. And that's fake news, WND.
100% agreed. Is this fake news?
Yeah,
yes.
That's our news
okay,
segment.
well, we know that much. All right, let's move on to this next one. This one's going to be a very clear-cut question. Is this a crime, and should someone do time? This is in Ohio. Our good friend, not good friend, but Governor John Kasich, who we talked about at length back in our good old presidential debate roundtables. So they were glorious times. Governor John Kasich in the news signed House Bill 470, which makes it a felony, makes it a third-degree felony, which is punishable up to 5 years in prison for assisting in a suicide. So this is a pretty straightforward question. Is it a crime to assist someone in a suicide?
Well, no, because by definition, suicide means they are killing themselves. So just by that definition, you'd have to say, no, it's not a crime because they're still inflicting this upon themselves. And I obviously opposed this law entirely, and really the law is the crime here. The law, if you're going to criminalize something that shouldn't be a crime, by logic, then that law is what is the crime, if that makes sense. But really, I do think that there is kind of an interesting question here. Like, where is the line between assisting someone to kill themselves and say like manslaughter or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I started thinking about when I was really looking into this you'd have to almost have contracts in place, laying everything out and have, witnesses there while everything's signed, because
you'd have to have doctors that said, like, psychologists that maybe said that. And again, this gets into a kind of shifty area too. Like, do I want the state saying that you have to go get this special psychological report to say you can commit suicide? I don't think that's good either. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I mean, you want to make sure that, I guess the danger is you could have someone that basically, maybe not me, but if someone could go convince their friend to kill themselves and quote unquote help them do it, and you might be able to construe that as a murder. Maybe say that friend wasn't in a good mental place, and where is that line? At what point you need some kind of evidence that the actual person truly did want to kill themselves for some. I guess it doesn't have to be for a medical reason, but I just think I see some elements of grayness here that could really cause some issues.
Yeah, and this is another issue where both sides look at it as black and white. You have people on the right saying, we're pro-life, you can't be killing yourself, you can't be helping people kill themselves. When, there's definitely huge gray areas. I mean, if you have someone terminally ill, they have, some type of cancer, if they have ALS, something like that, where they're just gonna wither away and die, and they want to kill themselves before they lose their function, their ability to function. Why shouldn't someone be allowed to do that? Why shouldn't someone be allowed to go with dignity? I mean, I don't want anyone killing themselves. I mean, so by speaking out against this law, people might attack myself or Mark and say that we're in favor of people killing themselves, which no, but we're in favor of people controlling their own body, controlling their own lives. And it's important, though, because there are some gray areas that this isn't taken advantage of. And I think you just have to bring contract law in.
I mean, you could definitely imagine some like psycho serial killer, like the kind you might see on like on a Netflix show or something like that, who uses laws like this to befriend people who are close to suicide, and actually it doesn't actually ends up killing all these people who had depression or something like that. And he gets to help them do it and gets off doing it because it's the law. You could see a weird kind of apocalyptic scenario like that developing with the right kind of psychopath working around the right kind of law, or the wrong kind of law.
The right kind of psychopath.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't clip off that quote.
That's the cold open right there. Right kind of psychopath. All right. So I think we're in agreement on that John Kasich assisted suicide felony bill. So let's move on. Next one, last one for Is This a Crime? This is out of Arizona. And Republican State Senator John Kavanaugh in the state of Arizona has introduced State Bill 1009, which would criminalize American flag theft as a Class 6 felony. Well, that's a low-level felony. It's still a felony, and he has his reasons. He says that people who display the flag for patriotism or even for protest, by stealing their flag, you are stealing their First Amendment expression of rights. So, Mark, is stealing someone's American flag, should it be, more than just stealing their toaster?
Stealing a toaster sounds so much worse to me, because then you're depriving people of delicious toasted items. And to me, that is much worse than taking their flag. But maybe I just value toasters more than flags. Other people might value flags more than toasters. But really, all we should care about in the event of a theft is the value of the item. Really, the monetary value of the item. That's all that should be a factor, because that's the only thing that's objective. Everything else is subjective. I might have a very prized possession that's worth 30 cents, and I might be very upset if it gets stolen. But because I prize it so much, you cannot, arbitrarily say that the person that stole my barely worth, my item, my little penny, maybe that's literally worth a penny, but it's my prized penny that I found on the street, and I love it so much. But if someone steals it, you can't say they have to have this special felony class put upon them because I happen to prize it so much. And that is essentially what this law is saying. Some specific people happen to prize an American flag emotionally more so, far and above the actual value of the flag, and therefore we have to attach a special criminal penalty to anybody that steals it. Now, obviously, we're against theft. Taxation is theft. That's what we're all upset about here with government, right? So obviously, we're against the idea of theft, and theft should be punished. But there's also something called equality under the law, and if we're going to find equality under the law, we have to punish crimes in a somewhat similar manner, and to attach a special value to an item just because there's some sort of nationalist or patriotic value that people attach to it is absurd and, dare I say, tyrannical in and of itself.
You know what? I really have nothing to add. I agree with everything you said.
I just did the perfect rant. Nothing can be added to it.
And I'm going to tag State Senator John Kavanaugh on Twitter and send this podcast to him.
Do it.
And hopefully he learns.
Maybe
hopefully
I'll just clip off that little rant and directly tweet. I'll put it on YouTube and send it right to his Twitter account.
Maybe we will. Learn about equality under the law.
We'll show him what the First Amendment's all about, won't we? Yeah, we will.
Exactly, we will.
Fast forward 30 days, we are banned from Twitter.
That's all we have for today. Any parting words, Mark, before I do a little outro here?
No, man, just that, keep your eyes out for crimes and decide if they are or not. I don't know. It's a fun activity to partake in because, like a lot of this stuff isn't black and white. And I think it's a very useful activity, especially when you see headlines that say things like California decriminalizes child prostitution. Well, sometimes we got to look into these things a little bit further. And I think, trying to break down where this is the activity essentially here. Where's the original crime? Where's that first initiation of force? And a lot of laws that get written here, they're addressing kind of like a second or third initiation of force where we need to really go back and see where a crime originates. And to me, a lot of these laws, the laws are the crimes themselves in a lot of these cases that we look at. So I think it's an activity we should all do, especially when reading these headlines out there, seeing all these laws pass. Every state, every year passes a bunch of silly laws. And I think it's a very helpful exercise to break this thing down. And hopefully we get to a point someday where everybody looks at laws this way. Everybody looks at a news story and thinks to themselves, is this a crime? And should anyone do time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you're going through your Facebook feed, this is what I try to do. Don't share something or like something until you read it for yourself, because it can be, who knows what somebody writes in an article. It could be something you don't agree with. You might agree with the headline, but what's written in the article could be something totally different. So just like Mark said, keep your eyes out for stuff like this. And oftentimes, yes, indeed, the actual law is the crime. And if you find stuff like this, you find interesting stories like this along your travels on the interwebs, you can email them to me, felonyfriday@lionsofliberty.com. Maybe we'll talk about them on the show. You can also post them in our Lions of Liberty forum. We have a Facebook forum. Go to facebook.com. Just punch up in the search bar at the top, Lions of Liberty forum. As long as you're a real person, we'll get you approved, and you can post your felony stories in the Lions of Liberty forum. We'll talk about them. There's a great group there, a very respectful group. We just passed 1,000 members, and it's growing quickly. So jump on board that.
We have not had to bring down the ban hammer, so to speak. There has not been a staple gate in our forum yet. So.
Oh, there has not been, and I hope there won't be. Hopefully, I've been very impressed with our Lions.
I'm actually amazed. I don't know how we've gone this far without really having any issues at all I can think of.
It's been pretty incredible, actually, but I hope it keeps up.
Yeah. I'm not afraid to go full dictator on that forum if I got to. I have it in me, guys. Don't press me.
Just start dictating. Just dictate.
Because I learned that if you go all dictator in your private group, people start writing articles about you. So it might actually be a good PR move. I don't know.
That's a Trump move. Yeah, Stapleton pulled a Trump move.
Did.
I don't even know if he knew he did, but he got so much free PR.
Right.
But one last note, if you listen on iTunes, even if you don't listen on iTunes, be sure to leave us a rating there, a 5-star rating, if you like what we're doing. Hopefully you do. At iTunes, give us a review, and be sure to subscribe if you are listening on iTunes so you get our Lions of Liberty in your feed every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's all I have for today. Thank you guys for listening. Really do appreciate it. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.